Nietzsche introduces the last man because the Overman alone would be misunderstood. Without a counterfigure, the Overman could be mistaken for an ideal, a fantasy, or an abstract aspiration. The last man shows what happens when humanity chooses the opposite direction, not collapse, but comfort. The danger Nietzsche is naming here is subtle. Civilization does not fall into chaos, it stabilizes. Life does not become unbearable, it becomes manageable. The last man appears where suffering has been reduced enough that nothing feels worth risking oneself for. This is why the last man is not tragic. He does not despair. He is satisfied. He has solved the problem of meaning by lowering its demands. Nietzsche sees this as far more dangerous than nihilistic breakdown, because it does not provoke resistance. The Overman represents the possibility of value creation after nihilism. The last man represents what most people will choose instead: safety over intensity, comfort over creation, survival over becoming. Nietzsche introduces him to show that nihilism does not always look like despair. It often looks like contentment. The last man also exposes the temptation built into modern life. Once metaphysical guarantees collapse, there are two responses: risk creating new values, or minimize desire so that nothing significant is lost. The last man chooses the second. Nietzsche does not introduce this figure to moralize or condemn. He introduces it to diagnose a trajectory. The last man is not evil. He is the endpoint of a long process of self-protection, risk reduction, and emotional flattening. This figure matters because it reveals that decline does not announce itself as decline. It arrives quietly, disguised as progress, comfort, and reasonable moderation. The last man believes he has improved upon the past. Nietzsche believes he has closed off the future. Without the last man, Nietzsche's philosophy could be read as romantic excess. With him, the stakes become clear. The alternative to affirmation is not chaos. It is peace without depth. Nietzsche introduces the last man to force a confrontation, not between good and evil, but between two ways of responding to a world without guarantees. One risks creation, the other perfects comfort. The last man is Nietzsche's warning that the greatest danger to humanity is not suffering, but the absence of anything worth suffering for. The last man is often misunderstood because he does not resemble traditional images of decline. He is not violent, fanatical, or cruel. He is reasonable, humane, and well-adjusted. Nietzsche's point is that danger no longer looks monstrous. It looks comfortable. The last man has learned to avoid extremes. He dislikes intensity, ambition, and risk because they threaten stability. Where previous cultures praised greatness, sacrifice, or transcendence, the last man prizes balance, safety, and emotional equilibrium. Nothing is worth being disturbed for. He does not reject happiness. He redefines it downward. Happiness becomes the absence of discomfort rather than the presence of meaning. Contentment replaces aspiration. Entertainment replaces purpose. Pleasure is frequent but shallow. The last man also avoids suffering not because he is cowardly, but because he sees suffering as unnecessary. Pain is treated as a technical problem to be solved, managed, or eliminated. Anything that cannot be optimized is quietly excluded from life. Nietzsche emphasizes that the last man is healthy by conventional standards. He lives long. He is rarely miserable. He avoids destructive passions. He cooperates well with others. All of this makes him appear successful, even admirable, to modern sensibilities. This is precisely why Nietzsche finds him dangerous. The last man has no enemies because he has no deep commitments. Conflict has been neutralized by lowering the stakes of life itself. Nothing matters enough to fight over. Nothing matters enough to defend. He does not deny meaning outright. He replaces it with routines, procedures, and habits that keep life running smoothly. Work is manageable. Leisure is constant. Desire is regulated. Nothing is demanded. Nietzsche's critique here is not psychological but existential. The last man does not suffer from despair. He suffers from the absence of depth. Life continues, but it no longer presses beyond itself. This makes the last man difficult to criticize. He has answers for everything. He is polite, tolerant, and cautious. He avoids fanaticism and excess. From within his world, he appears as the final achievement of civilization. Nietzsche introduces this figure to show that decline can arrive without violence, crisis, or collapse. It can arrive as completion. The last man is the human being who has decided that becoming is too dangerous and has chosen to remain exactly where he is. When Nietzsche puts the words, "We have invented happiness," into the mouth of the last man, he is not mocking joy itself. He is exposing a redefinition of happiness so narrow that it no longer threatens anything. Happiness here has been stripped of intensity, risk, and depth. This happiness is engineered. It is the result of optimization rather than aspiration. Life is arranged so that discomfort is minimized, surprise is controlled, and extremes are smoothed out. Nothing hurts too much. Nothing excites too deeply. The aim is not fulfillment, but manageability. Nietzsche sees this as a profound shift. Earlier cultures understood happiness as something bound up with struggle, danger, and excess, something costly. The last man's happiness is cheap. It asks for no sacrifice, no transformation, no risk of loss. This is why the phrase is delivered with pride. "We have invented happiness," signals mastery. Happiness is no longer something one pursues through becoming. It is something one administers. It can be planned, distributed, and maintained. But what has been eliminated along with suffering is greatness. Anything that demands more than comfort is quietly excluded. Ambition becomes unhealthy. Passion becomes imbalance. Depth becomes disturbance. Nietzsche is precise here. The problem is not that the last man is unhappy. It is that he is satisfied too easily. His happiness no longer points beyond itself. It does not open life outward. It closes it in. This form of happiness also dissolves tragedy. Tragedy requires stakes. It requires the possibility of loss that matters. When everything is arranged to be safe, tragedy disappears, and with it, the capacity for profound affirmation. The last man's happiness is therefore anti-tragic. It does not allow life to break open. It keeps everything within tolerable limits. Nietzsche sees this not as progress, but as impoverishment. The phrase, "we have invented happiness," is chilling because it implies finality. There is nothing left to seek, nothing left to risk. Happiness has been completed, and with it, becoming has been quietly shut down. Nietzsche's warning is not that happiness is false, but that happiness without depth becomes a terminal condition. It leaves no room for transformation, no pressure toward creation. The last man smiles and blinks. He is content. And in that contentment, Nietzsche sees the most dangerous form of nihilism, one that no longer feels like loss. The last man lives at the end of aspiration. He does not oppose greatness. He simply no longer understands why anyone would want it. Aspiration feels unnecessary, excessive, even irrational. Life is already comfortable. Why risk disturbing it? Nietzsche sees this as a decisive shift in how desire is structured. Aspiration once pulled life upward toward excellence, danger, and self-transformation. The last man redirects desire toward maintenance. The goal is no longer to become something else, but to remain stable. Greatness under these conditions appears embarrassing. It demands too much. It disrupts equilibrium. Those who aspire are treated with suspicion, as if they suffer from imbalance or delusion. Ambition becomes something to be managed rather than encouraged. This is why Nietzsche links the last man to mediocrity, but not in the sense of incompetence. The last man is competent, efficient, and capable. What he lacks is the willingness to risk himself for something that does not guarantee return. Aspiration always involves exposure. One may fail, one may be misunderstood, one may suffer. The last man has learned to eliminate these risks by lowering the stakes of life itself. Nothing is pursued that could truly be lost. Nietzsche does not frame this as cowardice. It is a rational adaptation to a world that values safety and predictability. The last man is sensible. He has calculated the costs and decided that aspiration is not worth it. But this calculation has consequences. Without aspiration, life ceases to press beyond itself. Energy that once drove creation is redirected into preservation. The future becomes an extension of the present rather than an opening. This also explains why the last man finds the Overman incomprehensible. The Overman risks everything without promise of comfort. From the last man's perspective, this looks irrational, even cruel. The end of aspiration does not produce despair, it produces contentment. But contentment here is static. It does not intensify life, it stabilizes it. Nietzsche sees this as a form of exhaustion disguised as maturity. Aspiration, for Nietzsche, is not about achievement. It is about tension, the willingness to live without guarantees. The last man resolves that tension by eliminating desire that could disrupt balance. In doing so, he closes off the future. The last man does not fail to aspire because he is weak. He fails to aspire because he has learned to prefer comfort over becoming, and has called that preference wisdom. The last man represents passive nihilism at its most complete. And this is why Nietzsche treats him as more dangerous than open despair. Passive nihilism does not destroy values in anger. It allows them to drain away quietly, without resistance, until nothing remains that demands commitment. In passive nihilism, life is not rejected, it is thinned. Meaning does not collapse dramatically, it fades. The last man does not say that nothing matters. He lives as if nothing matters enough to risk discomfort, loss, or failure. This is what makes passive nihilism so stable. There is no crisis to resolve, no breakdown to respond to. Life continues smoothly, work is tolerable, pleasure is frequent, suffering is managed. The absence of depth is not experienced as loss, because nothing deeper is remembered. Nietzsche understands that passive nihilism feels reasonable. It presents itself as maturity, moderation, and realism. Grand narratives have failed. Intense ideals have produced suffering. Why not scale everything down to what can be maintained? The last man answers nihilism not by overcoming it, but by adapting to it. He reorganizes life around low-intensity satisfaction. Values remain, but they no longer command sacrifice. Beliefs persist, but they no longer cost anything. This is why the last man does not experience despair. Despair requires longing. It requires the sense that something essential is missing. Passive nihilism eliminates longing itself. Desire is regulated until nothing hurts enough to protest. Nietzsche sees this as the final form of nihilism because it no longer seeks meaning. It no longer mourns its absence. It is content to live without it. Life becomes a sequence of manageable moments rather than a project that demands transformation. Passive nihilism also explains why resistance disappears. There is nothing to resist, no oppressive system, no tyrant, no crisis. The danger lies precisely in the absence of danger. The last man is therefore not the failure of civilization, but its successful exhaustion. Everything works well enough. Nothing presses beyond itself. Nietzsche's warning is clear. When nihilism becomes passive, it becomes invisible. It no longer announces itself as loss. It presents itself as comfort, balance, and sanity. The last man embodies this invisibility. He is not hostile to meaning. He has simply learned to live without it, and to call that condition happiness. With the last man, comfort stops being a side effect of life and becomes its organizing principle. This is a decisive shift. Comfort is no longer something one enjoys after effort, risk, or struggle. It becomes the value by which everything else is judged. Nietzsche's point is not that comfort is bad. It is that once comfort becomes supreme, everything that threatens it is treated as immoral. Discomfort is no longer a condition to be endured. It is an error to be eliminated. Risk becomes irresponsibility. Intensity becomes pathology. Under this value system, suffering is not meaningful, tragic, or formative. It is technical. Pain must be managed, optimized, medicated, or designed away. Anything that cannot be made comfortable is quietly excluded from serious consideration. This transforms ethics. Right and wrong are no longer about good and evil, strength and weakness, or creation and decay. They are about ease and inconvenience. What disrupts comfort is suspect. What preserves it is virtuous. Nietzsche sees this as a flattening of values. When comfort is supreme, all values are reduced to a single metric. Does this feel manageable? Anything that demands sacrifice without guarantee is rejected in advance. This also reshapes social life. Consensus becomes sacred because disagreement produces friction. Difference becomes threatening, not because it is dangerous, but because it is uncomfortable. Uniformity feels moral. Comfort as a value system also reinterprets compassion. To care for others now means to remove discomfort, not to challenge, provoke, or demand growth. Suffering is treated as something to be eliminated, not confronted. This produces kindness, but a kindness that fears depth. Nietzsche is careful here. He is not attacking kindness or care. He is diagnosing what happens when they are severed from any higher demand. Compassion without tension becomes another form of preservation. When comfort governs, greatness appears cruel. Why would anyone choose difficulty when ease is available? Why risk intensity when stability can be secured? The last man cannot understand this choice, and so he distrusts those who make it. This is why comfort becomes conservative in the deepest sense. It does not defend tradition. It defends the present arrangement of ease. Anything that threatens equilibrium is resisted, regardless of its creative potential. Nietzsche sees this as the final triumph of passive nihilism. Values have not disappeared. They have been simplified to the point where life no longer pressures itself beyond what is comfortable. Comfort, once elevated to a value system, closes the horizon of becoming. The last man does not suffer from this closure. He is protected by it. That protection is precisely the danger. Nietzsche links the last man to mass society, not because crowds are inherently bad, but because mass conditions reward flattening. Where life is organized around comfort, predictability, and efficiency, difference becomes friction, and friction is treated as a problem to be solved. In mass society, norms emerge not through shared aspiration, but through lowest risk consensus. What most people can tolerate becomes the standard. Anything that exceeds this tolerance, intensity, ambition, eccentricity, is quietly discouraged, not by force, but by social pressure. The last man thrives here because mass society protects him. Procedures replace judgment. Systems replace responsibility. Rules replace interpretation. This produces fairness, but also impersonality. No one must risk themselves. Everyone is managed. Nietzsche sees conformity here not as cowardice, but as adaptation. When comfort is supreme, standing out feels dangerous. Difference threatens equilibrium. As a result, uniformity comes to feel moral. Normal becomes synonymous with good. This is why the last man distrusts excellence. Excellence introduces inequality of intensity. It creates distance. In a mass society oriented toward comfort, distance is experienced as injustice. Everyone must be made comparable, and therefore smaller. Mass society also dissolves solitude. Noise, distraction, and constant connection prevent the withdrawal necessary for self-overcoming. The last man does not seek solitude because solitude produces discomfort. It confronts one with oneself. Nietzsche is precise here. The problem is not cooperation, organization, or shared life. The problem is when shared comfort replaces shared aspiration. Society becomes an apparatus for minimizing disturbance rather than cultivating strength. This is why mass culture often celebrates irony, moderation, and detachment. These attitudes allow participation without commitment. One can belong without risking belief. The last man excels at this. The flattening effect of mass society also explains why creation becomes rare. Creation requires deviation. Deviation produces instability. Mass systems are designed to eliminate instability. What emerges instead is repetition. Nietzsche does not predict tyranny here. He predicts peaceful stagnation. Life becomes calm, regulated and safe, and quietly loses its capacity to overcome itself. The last man fits perfectly into this arrangement. He neither rebels nor creates. He participates smoothly. He is the ideal inhabitant of a world that has decided comfort is enough. Mass society does not force the last man into existence. It rewards him. And reward, Nietzsche knows, is far more effective than coercion. Nietzsche brings the last man and the Overman into direct contrast because they represent two fundamentally different responses to a world without guarantees. This is not a moral opposition between good and evil. It is a divergence in orientation toward life itself. The last man organizes life around comfort. The Overman organizes life around creation. Everything else follows from this difference. Where the last man seeks security, the Overman accepts risk. Where the last man minimizes suffering, the Overman accepts suffering as inseparable from becoming. The last man wants life to be manageable. The Overman wants life to be expressive. This contrast also explains why the last man finds the Overman disturbing. From the standpoint of comfort, creation looks reckless. From the standpoint of stability, risk appears immoral. The Overman's willingness to endanger himself for something that offers no guarantee feels irresponsible, even cruel. Nietzsche insists that neither figure can understand the other from within their own logic. The last man evaluates actions by how well they preserve equilibrium. The Overman evaluates them by whether they intensify life. Each framework renders the other unintelligible. The last man sees the Overman as unnecessary. Life already works, needs are met, suffering is minimized. Why introduce danger? The Overman sees the last man as stalled. Life continues, but it no longer presses forward. Becoming has been replaced by maintenance. This is why Nietzsche refuses to moralize the contrast. The last man is not wicked. He is the logical outcome of a long process of risk reduction. The Overman is not virtuous. He is the expression of surplus, of life that can afford to risk itself. The contrast also clarifies Nietzsche's deepest concern. If comfort becomes absolute, creation becomes unintelligible. If safety becomes sacred, transformation becomes taboo. The last man does not oppose the Overman actively. He simply makes him impossible. The Overman requires tension. The last man eliminates it. One opens the future. The other extends the present indefinitely. Nietzsche presents this contrast not as a prediction, but as a choice of direction. Humanity can organize itself around preservation or around creation. There is no synthesis. The two orientations exclude one another. The last man wins not by defeating the Overman, but by removing the conditions under which the Overman could appear. That is why this contrast matters. It shows that the struggle is not between ideologies, but between ways of living, between remaining and becoming. Nietzsche knows that the last man is attractive, and this is precisely why he treats him as such a serious danger. If the last man were obviously repellent, there would be no problem. The fact that he feels reasonable, humane, and sensible is what gives him his power. The last man offers relief. He promises freedom from anxiety, from risk, from failure, from the burden of becoming something more than one already is. After centuries of moral pressure, religious guilt, and heroic ideals, this relief feels earned. One can finally rest. This attractiveness is intensified by exhaustion. Nietzsche understands that cultures tire. When the energy required for creation runs low, preservation becomes appealing. The last man does not arrive through corruption or collapse, but through fatigue. He offers a way to live comfortably when strength has waned. The last man also appeals to compassion. He reduces suffering, he avoids cruelty, he minimizes harm. From a humanitarian perspective, this looks like moral progress. Nietzsche does not deny the reduction of suffering. He questions what is lost when suffering becomes the ultimate evil. There is also a democratic attraction here. The last man does not elevate anyone above others. He levels differences. Everyone is included because no one is asked to rise. This feels fair. It also eliminates excellence. The last man is attractive because he removes the demand to justify oneself existentially. One no longer has to ask what one is living for. Life becomes a series of manageable satisfactions rather than a project that risks failure. This is calming. Nietzsche recognizes that most people will choose this, not out of malice, but because it feels kind, reasonable, and safe. The last man does not threaten, he reassures. This is why Nietzsche refuses to moralize him. Condemnation would miss the point. The last man is not chosen because people are bad, but because they are tired. The attraction of the last man is therefore a symptom. It signals that the cost of creation feels too high and the rewards too uncertain. Comfort becomes the rational choice. Nietzsche's warning is not that people should resist this attraction through guilt or duty. It is that once this attraction becomes dominant, the possibility of overcoming quietly disappears. The last man does not conquer humanity. Humanity chooses him, willingly, peacefully, and with relief. That is why he is so difficult to oppose. Nietzsche is careful to frame the last man as a figure of decline, not of evil. This distinction matters. Evil implies malice, intent, or transgression. The last man does nothing wrong. He violates no rule. He harms no one deliberately. And that is precisely why he is so difficult to resist. Decline for Nietzsche is not moral failure. It is a loss of vitality, a weakening of life's capacity to generate tension, risk, and creation. The last man embodies this weakening in its most peaceful form. Nothing collapses, nothing explodes. Life simply grows smaller. This is why the last man cannot be opposed through moral outrage. Moral outrage presupposes wrongdoing. The last man offers none. He lives well within the rules, often better than anyone else. He is tolerant, careful, and responsible. Nietzsche insists that this makes the situation worse, not better. When decline wears the mask of virtue, it becomes invisible. There is nothing to fight against, no injustice to protest, no crisis to respond to. The last man also does not experience himself as declining. From within his world, everything appears improved. Violence is reduced, life expectancy increases, discomfort is managed. To call this decline sounds perverse, even cruel. But Nietzsche's criterion is not comfort, it is creative intensity. Decline occurs when life no longer produces new values, new forms, or new horizons. By this measure, the last man represents an end point, not because life ends, but because becoming does. This is why Nietzsche refuses to demonize the last man. Demonization would flatter him. It would give him an enemy. The last man has no enemies because he has no stakes. Everything has been neutralized. Decline here is silent. It does not announce itself with decay or corruption. It appears as completion. Humanity believes it has solved the problem of existence by making it manageable. Nietzsche's concern is not that people will suffer under the last man. It is that they will stop wanting anything that demands suffering. When that happens, life's creative tension dissolves. This is why the last man represents decline rather than evil. Evil can be resisted. Decline must be recognized, and recognition is far harder when nothing feels wrong. The last man is not a villain. He is the moment when life no longer asks more of itself. Nietzsche presents the last man as a figure, but he is really describing a pattern of life, one that can appear in many forms without announcing itself. The last man does not require a specific political system, culture, or ideology. He emerges wherever comfort, safety, and manageability become the highest values. One modern expression is distraction without depth. Endless stimulation replaces engagement. Information replaces understanding. One is never bored, but never fully present. This constant noise prevents confrontation with oneself, which would be uncomfortable. Silence becomes threatening. Another expression is procedural meaning. Life is organized through systems, routines, and metrics rather than purpose. One follows processes correctly, behaves appropriately, and feels justified without asking what any of it is for. Meaning is replaced by compliance. The last man also appears in the obsession with risk elimination. Everything must be safe, regulated, insured, and moderated. While this reduces harm, it also removes conditions under which greatness might appear. What cannot be made safe is treated as irresponsible. There is also a therapeutic form of the last man. All suffering is framed as dysfunction. Every discomfort must be treated, processed, or resolved. Growth through struggle is replaced by stabilization. The goal is not transformation, but emotional equilibrium. Irony becomes another refuge. One participates without commitment, criticizes without risk, and believes without believing. Irony allows distance from intensity. Nothing matters too much. This protects comfort while maintaining the appearance of sophistication. The last man also expresses himself through flattened values. Everything is reduced to preference. Strong evaluations are seen as dangerous. To care deeply is to invite conflict. Neutrality becomes moral. Nietzsche is not condemning any single one of these tendencies in isolation. He is showing how, together, they form a way of life that avoids becoming. Life continues, but nothing presses beyond itself. These expressions feel humane, reasonable, and progressive. That is their danger. The last man does not impose himself violently. He spreads through incentives, convenience, and relief. This is why Nietzsche's warning remains relevant. The last man does not belong to a historical moment. He belongs to a direction of civilization, one that replaces aspiration with comfort and calls that maturity. The last man is already here, not as a tyrant, but as a pattern quietly rewarded. Nietzsche does not treat the possible victory of the last man as a failure of intelligence, morality, or politics. He treats it as a problem of energy. The last man may win because overcoming requires surplus, and surplus is rare. Creation is expensive. It demands strength, tolerance for uncertainty, and the ability to endure isolation and misunderstanding. Comfort, by contrast, is cheap. It spreads easily because it promises relief rather than risk. The last man does not demand greatness. He offers rest. Nietzsche understands that most people will not choose the Overman's path, not because they are wrong, but because they are tired. After the collapse of metaphysical meaning, life feels heavy. The last man offers a way to keep going without carrying that weight. This is why Nietzsche does not predict a dramatic struggle. There is no final battle between the last man and the Overman. The last man wins quietly by removing the conditions under which overcoming can occur. Education becomes training, culture becomes entertainment, risk becomes pathology. The last man also benefits from moral language. Comfort presents itself as compassion. Safety presents itself as care. Stability presents itself as responsibility. These are not lies, but they become absolute, and absolutes always crowd out alternatives. Nietzsche recognizes that resistance to this process feels cruel. To demand risk, aspiration, or intensity looks inhumane in a world organized around minimizing harm. The Overman appears indifferent. The last man appears kind. This asymmetry matters. The last man does not need to argue. He is already aligned with the dominant values of comfort, inclusion, and manageability. Overcoming must justify itself, and justification is precisely what Nietzsche refuses. The last man may win because he does not provoke conflict. He offers peace. Peace, once achieved, becomes difficult to disturb. Creation always disturbs. Nietzsche does not conclude that the last man must win. He concludes that nothing guarantees the survival of becoming. Life does not automatically overcome itself. It can settle, it can stabilize, it can choose not to risk itself again. This is why Nietzsche writes Zarathustra as a warning rather than a prophecy. The future is not decided, but the conditions favor the last man. Overcoming requires exceptional strength, and history does not promise to provide it. The last man's victory would not look like catastrophe. It would look like success. Humanity would live long, safely and comfortably, and no longer ask why. That possibility is what Nietzsche wants his reader to face without consolation.